Good morning, everyone. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Investments. Today is Wednesday, October 13th. We do have a board offsite portion today that's going to follow the regular agenda of the Board of Investments. Linda, could you please read any announcements and then call the roll to confirm attendance?
Absolutely. And just open it up. Thank you, Chair Knox. This meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting, so I would do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Mr. Green?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Ginsburg?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Santos?
All present on the count of four.
Thank you. Mr. Kehoe?
Good morning, present.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwood? Mr. Jones?
I am here.
Thank you. Mr. Bernstein?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez is running late, and Chair Knox.
I am here.
Okay. Staff participating in the meeting include the following: CIO John Grable, CEO Santos Craven, Deputy CEO Luis Lugo, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, AEO JJ Popovich, new AEO Laura Guglielmo, interim CFO Ted Granger, Legislative Affairs Officer Barry Liu. Investment staff include Jude Perez, Chris Wagner, Vache Masaragian, James Wright, Scott Drazel, BD Acevedo, Esmeralda Del Bosque, Chad Timka, David Chu, and David Simpson. Consultants participating in the meeting include the Makita Investment Group, Stepstone, and Alborn. Trustees, please use the Zoom chat option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you're ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda.
Thank you, Linda. Next item is the approval of minutes from September 8th, 2021.
I will move the minutes.
Questions otherwise? Moved by Mr. Bernstein, seconded by Mr. Green. Linda, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Santos?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwood? Okay. Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Okay. And Chair Knox?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Item 3, report on closed session items, is posted and available on LACERA.com. Unless anyone has any questions on that, we are on to public comment. Linda, I believe we have a few folks that are signed up to speak.
Yes, the first person we'll bring in is Jordan Ash. Jordan, you will have 3 minutes to address the board, and you may begin now.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning. My name is Jordan Ash, and I'm with the Private Equity Stakeholder Project. The Los Angeles County Employees Retirement Association is invested in PAI Partners, a private equity firm that is a co-owner of Refresco, the world's largest independent bottling company. Refresco produces beverages such as Body Armor sports drink for Coca-Cola, Gatorade for Pepsi, Arizona iced tea, and Tropicana juices. PAI Partners prides itself on its responsible investing and on its stated concern for ESG. However, Refresco's actions appear to directly contradict PAI Partners' ESG policy. In June of this year, a majority of the almost 250 workers at the Refresco bottling plant in New Jersey voted to join the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America Union, also known as the UE. According to the UE, the mostly Latin American immigrant workforce started organizing with the union a year and a half ago to counter the abusive treatment by supervisors, low wages, minimal benefits, sexual harassment, constant schedule changes, and an unforgiving attendance system that penalized workers for getting sick. The Wall Street Journal reported that in the spring of 2020, workers at the New Jersey Refresco plant staged a walkout to protest the unsafe working conditions during the pandemic after a manager berated a worker who was worried about the coronavirus and felt ill. According to the workers, one supervisor said that workers who had COVID should just drink Gatorade and break a sweat, and the company refused to change its attendance policy for workers who got sick or self-quarantined at home. Refresco hired a notorious union-busting law firm, which has a long history of trying to prevent workers from organizing. Workers were not intimidated, and a majority of the workers voted to unionize. Refresco, however, is refusing to recognize the union and contested the results of the election. The National Labor Relations Board ruled against Refresco's baseless objections, but Refresco is appealing that ruling. A PAI Partners ESG report said, in today's world, businesses like ours and those we invest in are judged on more than just their financial results. Companies that exploit workers face reputational impacts and lower sales. Refresco's actions appear to directly contradict PAI Partners' ESG policy. PAI Partners is now considering taking Refresco public through an IPO, which is all the more reason why PAI Partners should want to resolve these issues with its workers. Please ask PAI Partners what steps it is taking to ensure that its portfolio companies, including Refresco, are following its ESG policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Next, we will call on Anthony Sanchez. Anthony, you will have 3 minutes to address the board, and you may begin now.
Good morning. My name is Anthony Sanchez, and I've been a machine operator for 15 years at the New Jersey Refresco plant. I am able to join you today because I am currently out of work with an injury that it was made a lot worse by the Refresco. The company wouldn't let me off work for medical care, so I had to keep working until I have enough family medical leave act time accumulated to take time off without losing my job. This took months, and the months I worked with an injury made everything so much worse, and I had to get a more serious surgery. When I was working since Refresco implemented a 12 rather than 8-hour schedule, I have been unable to meet all my expenses. I have 2 young children, ages 8 and 3, who depend on my financial support. Lately, my salary is not enough. I'm not eating well because I have to buy cheap food to survive and to support my family and my children. My nutrition is not good because to have a good nutrition is too expensive for me to afford. For me to meet my expenses, I have always had to work overtime. But lately, overtime is not helping enough since Refresco implemented a 12-hour schedule intending to eliminate overtime for workers. There are now times when I can't pay my bills, barely paying the minimum of my credit card debt. I am always behind a month on my phone bills, internet, and cable. The employer provides health insurance that is abysmal, very expensive, limited coverage, high deductibles. I had to go onto the marketplace instead to get better health coverage. When I'm not at the plant, I live in complete stress because when I'm not there, I think about how I will have to go back and work. Then when I am at work, it's not a friendly environment and it's hostile. I've been retaliated against for trying to organize a union at my workplace. It's been almost 4 months since we had a union election.
Mr. Sanchez, your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will call on Abdin Moran. Please note, Mr. Abdin Moran also has a translator, John Ocampo, who will be translating for us. Mr. Moran, you may begin now. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Mr. Moran, can you hear us?
Yes,
We are here.
I am here.
Okay, you can start now.
Ok.
Comience a hablar.
Ok. Mi nombre es Abdón Morán. Tengo 56 años de edad. Tengo trabajando acá en esta empresa 21 años. 21 años juntos porque tuve 20 años tengo de permanente y año con 8 meses fui de temporal.
So my name is Abdul Moran. I'm 56 years old and I've been working at Refresco, which is owned by PAI Partners, for over 20 years now.
Ok, yo en mi familia cuento con familia aquí y familiares en mi país. Aquí cuento con mi esposa y 2 hijos, uno de 29 años y el otro de 21. En mi país cuento con la mayoría de mis hermanos y mi madre, que es lo principal. Y mi madre, bueno, porque ella tiene 80 años de edad, se está delicada de salud, porque a ella le pusieron una prótesis en el fémur y como toda persona de la edad sufren de los ojos y de la presión alta.
So I have family to care for here and back home in my home country. So I have 2 children here, aged 29 and 21, and I have family back in Ecuador, extended family, including my mother, who is now in her 80s and just had to get a prosthetic leg or something to help with her femur. She's in a delicate state of health.
Okay, y bueno, ya no tengo la dicha de tener en mi país a mi padre porque él falleció hace 2 años.
And my father's no longer alive.
Okay, entonces quiero hablar de la problemática en la compañía, porque yo he visto pasar muchas administraciones y esta es la que menos ha dado fruto, la que se nos ha ido encima en contra del trabajador, que somos los que nos toca poner el hombro y sacar la compañía adelante. Y además de eso tenemos preocupación por lo que está pasando.
So right now we've got probably the worst management we've ever had at the plant here in Wharton, New Jersey, in Refresco. The situation is just getting drastically worse, and there are lots of problems right now for workers in the plant.
Okay, yo quiero confirmar es por lo que los abusos, aquí se buscó la ayuda de la Unión, porque aquí se estaba abusando de las personas y en el sentido que a la gente la ponen a hacer doble trabajo, donde se necesita 3 personas, ponen a uno y ponen en riesgo físicamente a los compañeros, como esta semana un amigo se cogió el brazo, la mano, y eso a sabiendo de los jefes inmediatos y los jefes grandes, que a ellos cuando les conviene, dicen, por ejemplo, si son 3 personas, y dicen, sí, pero es peligroso, no, póngalo nomás, porque le conviene no parar las máquinas. Entonces
So
nos ponen físicamente a nosotros.
They are physically putting us in danger at this plant. They're forcing us to do the work. We went and sought out the support of a union because we were being severely abused and continue to be in the plant. We're forced to work long shifts. We're also forced to do the work each of 2 or 3 workers, and we're just being pushed beyond the limit. And in fact, on Sunday, a worker at the plant got his arm stuck in a machine because he was working multiple machines when you should only be operating one machine at a time. So we're being physically put at risk of harm.
Y entonces necesitamos la ayuda de la Unión porque ellos como seres humanos a nosotros no nos consideran. Nos demostraron en la pandemia y ahora ellos en vez de cambiar siguen lo mismo. A ellos lo que les importa es el dinero y no nos importa ni como trabajadores, ni como ¿cómo es que se llama? Ni como seres humanos. Y esto se convirtió en una dictadura que nos perjudica a nosotros como trabajadores y a toda la familia entera.
So that's why we sought out the support of a union, because we're not treated like human beings here at the plant. COVID last year was another example of this, where our lives were put at risk. And, our workplace right now is essentially a dictatorship. They don't care about us as people, as workers or as human beings.
Y dígale que la administración que está ahora, yo se lo he repetido a ellos, que no ha sido buena, tanto en lo económico, porque nosotros también nos preocupamos por la compañía y esto va para atrás, pero más es por el maltrato de la gente. Ellos siguen maltratando a la gente y faltándonos el respeto, que es lo más importante. No solo a nosotros, sino a la familia junta.
The current management at the plant is, they're not doing a good job in terms of how they're treating people. They are abusing workers. And then the other side of it too is that the administration at the plant doesn't know how to run the plant. They've so disrespected and kicked workers around that people don't want to work at the plant right now, and production is suffering. So the business itself is suffering. Investors, money is not being put to good use, because they've so alienated the workforce that production at the plant is not what it should be. And so even workers' families are suffering at this point.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes is up, Mr. Moran.
Okay.
Thank you. And that concludes
You're
public
welcome.
comment.
Thank you very much, Linda. And Mr. Grable, just to clarify, I know some of us are familiar with PAI, but did you want to weigh in on just what our investment was with them and whether that is relevant here?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I recognize that this isn't agendized, but I'll just inform the board that we are not an investor in Refresco or the fund that owns it.
Thank you very much. And we are moving on to item 5, the CEO report. Mr. Kryman.
Yes, good morning, Trustee Knox, trustees. I understand that, I've read that you have a very, very full calendar, so I'm going to make this very, very brief. In addition to the report provided to you all, I just wanted to update you on some decisions that were made by the Board of Supervisors last week in terms of the positions that were approved by the Board of Retirement and Board of Investments. We're going to have a closed session, so I'll reserve my more detailed comments for that particular point in time. But the Board of Supervisors considered all of the positions. They approved a majority of them. They've eliminated some, rejected some, and then they also decided that some of the compensation levels that were approved by both boards was not appropriate, and did not approve our particular requests. So more detail to come. I also wanted to update you on our COVID issues, not issues, I'm sorry, our COVID protocols that we're putting in place. We're in the process of negotiating an agreement with Fulgent to assist us with the testing protocols. Those have been delayed in terms of our negotiations, but I've been told yesterday that the contract is in their hands at this particular point in time and is being considered, and we should be able to execute, hopefully, a testing contract with Fulgent by the end of this week or early next week. We've been processing all of the requests from staff in terms of the exceptions that have been asked for religious or medical reasons. We processed approximately 31 exemptions. All staff have been notified at this particular point in time the status of their exemption requests. And so I do want to also inform you that approximately 88% of the staff are fully vaccinated at this particular point in time, and we're in the process of reviewing and moving forward with some of the protocols that need to be in place in terms of any progressive discipline that may be required as a result of non-compliance with our vaccine mandate. So those two are the major items that I wanted to bring to your attention, and so I'll be more than happy to stand for any questions if you should have some.
We have a question from Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Santos, I think it was in yesterday's Washington Post, it might have been the New York Times. There was an article about COVID and religious exemptions, the gist of which was most religious denominations have come out in support of COVID vaccinations. Is there a reason you're not disclosing the disposition of these requests to us? You cited the number of requests, but you didn't cite the disposition of them. Yes or no? Yes or no, in terms of your decision?
Yeah, I think that I want to be sensitive to the privacy of our employees and our staff. And so I think that it's appropriate for my staff to take a look at it and to approve or disapprove any of the exemptions and to know what the status is. And I can tell you that I have taken a very liberal approach to it. I'm not really interested in getting into an argument, quite frankly, with staff on whether or not they meet a specific standard. I think that we're taking the path that is appropriate for LACERA at this particular point in time in our employees.
Okay. And my other question was, did I hear Linda cite a new title for Mr. Granger when she was doing roll call?
I didn't
I
hear.
said the interim CFO.
Oh, you still said interim. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was it. Those are my
sorry.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I don't see anyone else in the queue. We are moving on to item 6, our CIO report. Mr. Grable.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair and Calvin. If you can pull up the slides, that'd be terrific. And I'll thank Calvin in advance. I think it's important for us to keep him caffeinated today because Calvin's going to be driving slides, and I know that we've got a lot in front of us. So thank you, Calvin. And if you could turn to page 4, that would be terrific. As page 4 shows, if we look at the top left, that is the global equity market, our benchmark for global equities, the MSCI All Country World Index. For the month ending September 30th, it's down 4%. That is very different than the past 18 months or so, or 17 months, where we've seen the markets, more or less go up in a uniform direction. And that's an important reminder for all of us that investing is hard. And when you compare, even after a 4% month, that 1 year, the markets are still up close to 30%, it puts everything into perspective. On the bottom right, we could see that it was also a tough month for bonds. I believe the 10-year treasury today is in the 150s. A year ago, it was mid-70s in terms of basis points. So there's been while they're still at historic lows, that is a significant rise in rates. If we can turn, Calvin, to slide 9. And as we'll discuss in the latter half of today's meeting with kind of the theme of continuous evolution, this is a new page for us. Same information, but a new format for our performance slide. It's something that we continuously work on. The data on this slide is as indicated on the top. This is for the fund balance as of the end of August. The fund was up 2.7% and hit another high watermark of $73.8 billion. The chart, the pie chart on the right shows our actual asset allocation, and we are within target for all asset categories and very close and probably within range for our new strategic asset allocation, which began October 1st, was the first step in terms of legging into our new strategic asset allocation. And the last slide I'll touch on is slide 10. Thank you, Calvin. If everyone can look on the chart on the top left, where it shows the returns of the pension fund, and we can see for the 1, 3 fiscal year, 1, 3, 5, and 10-year periods, we are above our benchmark. I tend to say that we shouldn't use benchmarks for marketing purposes. If you beat your benchmarks in all dimensions, there's probably something wrong with your benchmark. But maybe this may be a moment either for me to retire or something, because I doubt that we'll have many periods from here on out where we beat our benchmark in every time period. With that said, it's likely that we will have significant tracking error over the next couple of years as we implement our new strategic asset allocation for asset categories such as private equity, hedge funds, and liquid credit. Those do not have investable benchmarks, which means that we will have embedded underweights where there's kind of a premium associated with something that we can't or can invest in for those asset categories, such that there is what is referred to as misfit within our benchmarks probably over the next couple of years. With that said, we will be making recommendations to the board over the next period in order to get as close as possible in a prudent manner to our new targets. And the last thing I'll mention is OPEB at the bottom of the slide. OPEB is also at a high water mark of about $2.4 billion. OPEB was up 1.5% for the month. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to stand for questions.
I do not have anyone in the queue. Any questions for Mr. Grable? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Grable. On to item 7, consent items. We have 2 recommendations by Ms. Sanchez as Chair of the Credit and Risk Mitigation. The first, that the board approve initiatives and recommendations related to the credit structure review, and the second, to approve an illiquid credit emerging manager program.
I'll move the consent items.
Moved by Mr. Kehoe,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Bernstein. No discussion that I see. Linda, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Santos?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood? Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez? Okay, Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. On to non-consent 8A, a recommendation that the board approve biennial amendments to the growth functional category. Mr. Wagner.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Usually structure reviews, in this case amendments to structure reviews, go through a 2-part process. They go to the equity committee first, and then they move on to the board for approval. I want to thank the chairs of the committee and the board, as well as the vice chair of the board, for recommending that we do this in one fell swoop and get everything done today. So we really appreciate it. Calvin, if you could turn to page, I think it's 3, one right there. Thank you. As a reminder, private equity is part of the growth portfolio, the growth functional category. If you look to the donut chart on the left, you'll see the 3 components of the growth portfolio: private equity, global equity, and non-core real estate. It was back in December when the board approved the last growth functional category biennial structure review, which included a private equity investment pacing amount of $1.6 billion plus or minus 20% for 2021. Only 1 year of investment pacing was recommended at the time, when we would typically request 2, because the board was less than a year away from considering a new strategic asset allocation and a possible change to the private equity target allocation. With the strategic asset allocation study now completed and the private equity target allocation moved from 10 to 17%, we are seeking approval today to increase the 2021 pacing amount, establish a 2022 pacing amount, and change some parameters of the co-investment and secondary program as a result of this target increase to private equity. We're also seeking approval to incorporate a private equity investment guideline that was left out of a previous structure review. So now I'd like to turn the presentation over to David Simpson, who will take us through the pacing and investment guideline proposed changes. And he'll be followed by David Chu, who will take us through the co-investment and secondary program proposed changes. David Simpson.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and trustees. As Chris mentioned, the board increased the private equity target from 10% of the portfolio to 17%. On slide 5, we can see that working with the Stepstone team and leveraging their pacing model, staff now reverts to the board with a revised pacing plan that will enable LACERA to approach the 17% target level in the next 5 years. These projections are based on numerous factors and assumptions, including the total fund value, contributions and distributions to beneficiaries, the actuarial rate of return, and the portfolio composition mix of new commitments between venture capital, buyouts, and co-investments, along with their expected returns and timing of cash flows. These assumptions are detailed in Appendix A. The staff recommends revising the 2021 target allocation from 1.6 billion to 2.15 billion, and setting the 2022 number at 2.45 billion, in all cases plus or minus 20%. Based on the modeling to approach the 17% target, LACERA's commitments to private equity in the coming years will climb to over 3 billion per year. Staff will revisit the progress towards the 17% target during the 2023-24 structure review in Q4 of 2022 and recommend any modifications as warranted at that time. Moving on to slide 6. In 2019, as part of the investment policy statement, the board approved guidelines for the CIO to authorize investments in follow-on funds. No changes are sought to the guidelines at this time. Staff is simply recommending that these guidelines be incorporated into the PE investment guidelines of the structure review, which is Appendix B. So with that, I'll hand it over to David Chu, who will provide an update on the co-investment and secondary programs.
Turn to slide 8. Good morning, Mr. Chair and trustees. Before providing an update on the program, we thought it would be helpful to provide a quick recap of the program's timeline, just given the different trustee tenures. This update is a preview to today's board offsite theme, which is LACERA's continued evolution from allocator to best-in-class investor. This program is an example of where we've made some nice strides in that journey. So starting on the left of the timeline, about 3.5 years ago, the board asked staff to evaluate the feasibility of developing an internal co-investment program. Previously, LACERA outsourced co-investments to Morgan Stanley in private equity. At the end of 2018, the board approved staff's recommendation to develop an internal program primarily based on the fee savings and other intangible benefits. As a quick reminder, co-investments are typically minority investments made directly in portfolio companies alongside a general partner. There are typically no management fees or carried interest when we make these investments directly. During the first half of 2020, staff went to work and developed the program's investment criteria, due diligence processes, and sourcing strategies. By the third quarter of 2019, we closed our first co-investment and reactivated our secondary program. Fast forward to today, we've committed over 640 million across co-investments and secondaries. Next slide, please. These next 2 slides cover the program's performance. This first slide covers investments over a year old. Given the total program is only 2 years old, we thought this portfolio view could be instructive. On the left, you see the report card for co-investments. Starting off with a net IR of nearly 90%. While this figure is impressive, we know it is not sustainable. What we're more encouraged by is the net multiple of 2.2x, which shows that the portfolio value has more than doubled, and a net DPI of 0.2x, which means 20% of our investments we've already received back in cash. We're also comforted by the fact that the portfolio has been resilient despite the pandemic. On the right is the performance for secondaries that are over a year old. You can see similarly strong performance with net IR of nearly 50%, a similar almost doubling of portfolio value, and a net DPI of 0.4x, which equates to approximately $35 million cash back already from our 89 million of invested capital. Turning to the next slide. This shows the performance of all our investments since the program's inception a couple years ago. Since the program's inception, we've achieved over 9 million in fee savings and counting. The key takeaway is while the portfolio is off to a good start, it is still way too early to celebrate. We want to reassure the board that we are staying disciplined and vigilant. Turning to the next slide. As part of the program's update, we also wanted to provide a snapshot of where we are with regards to deployment for this year. looking at the bar chart, you can see that the staff has reached its deployment limit of 450 million, which is broken down into 303 million in commitments and the remainder earmarked for potential deals. Given the proposed increase in annual PE commitment pacing, we would like to propose a similar increase in annual deployment limits for co-investments and secondaries, which is a good segue to the next slide. These are the proposed program parameter changes for the remainder of this year and calendar year 2022. These are expected to provide staff more flexibility to effectively scale the program considering the recommended increase in deployment pace. Starting with the middle, the annual deployment term, as mentioned, the current limit is 450 million, which is approximately 30% of the 1.6 billion annual deployment target. Given the proposed increases in pacing on the right, we are proposing a similar 30% limit of the annual PE deployment target. In 2021, if you look on the right, this equates to a limit of 645 million. The math is based on the 2.15 billion proposed annual target multiplied by 30%. In 2022, this equates to a limit of 735 million. The other two proposed parameter changes, investment size at the top left and geography at the bottom left, are about providing staff the flexibility to take advantage of good opportunities regardless of deal type or geography. Regarding investment size, previously, you can see that co-investments and secondaries had different parameters. What we'd like to propose to keep things simple and consistent is to have the same maximum investment size globally of 130 million. And with regards to geographic exposure, we are recommending that the parameter be changed to adhere to the existing target allocation range of 20 to 45%, which applies to the total private equity portfolio. Turning to the next slide, in summary, we are recommending the following. As Chris mentioned, increasing the proposed PE commitment amounts in 2021 and 2022, given the increase in PE's target allocation, which is also supported by Stepstone. We're also recommending incorporating the CIO's delegated authority for re-ups into the PE investment guidelines. And lastly, adopting the proposed parameter changes to the co-investment and secondary program we just discussed. And with that, we are happy to address any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chu, Mr. Wagner, and the team. I have a question from Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Hi, David. Good morning. Can you go back to slide 12 and take me through the geography co-investment again?
Sure. So I'll start with on the left. You can see the current parameters. Co-investments currently for outside the US or international are limited to 40 million and 150 million annual deployment. What we'd like to do is to have a single global maximum investment, 130 billion, which would allow staff to take advantage of the best opportunities globally. For example, if there's a great co-investment in Europe, we wouldn't want to limit our maximum investment to 40. We'd like to take full advantage and invest 130 million if possible.
Okay, so but you're also reducing the 150 to 130, no?
The 150 annual deployment, what we're suggesting is not having a particular limit within co-investments, but to have the geographic exposure limit be adhere to the, over on the right, if you've seen the green bullet on the bottom, the overall PE portfolio, which includes funds, co-investments and secondaries, has a target board approved range of 20 to 45%. So any co-investments or secondaries we would make, we're proposing that we would still have to adhere to that global exposure limit, as opposed to just within co-investments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have Mr. Jones, followed by Mr. Santos.
Good morning to everyone. So question, I get the math in terms of the step-up pacing in order to meet the target. Can you illuminate a little bit for me and perhaps some of the other trustees here? Is the stepped-up pacing, is it going to give us larger positions in existing opportunities we already see? Are there so many other good opportunities that we don't have an opportunity to participate in because of the limit? I'm just trying to make sure I understand the underlying sourcing of quality deals that we have for which to spend the new pacing on. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, or what are you guys kind of assuming is happening there?
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Jones, and by the way, good morning, Mr. Kelly. Just Calvin, if you could turn back to the chart with deployment pacing, I think the deployment chart. I think it's slide 9. Sorry, slide 11. So I think this gives a snapshot with regards to the deal flow. So you can see for this year, as of today, we've already hit the $450 million limit. And this is based on deals we've already committed to, as well as what we see in our pipeline that we have conviction that we will likely commit to. And so with regards to deal flow, we are confident that we would be able to deploy the additional allocation if increased for this year, as well as for next year with regards to a higher allocation based on the increased pacing amount. How we would deploy that capital would be a combination of not only putting more capital in deals, so making larger investments, but also making a larger number of investments. So a combination of the two would allow us to reach those increased amounts. And again, I just want to emphasize that these are our limits. If we don't come across the right opportunities, we would not approach those limit amounts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Stepstone. I don't know who's present here today, but before Stepstone steps in, I want to thank the staff for the work that was done to recommend these changes, and very supportive. Been very close to private equity as the chair of the private equity committee for many years. I have seen the program evolve over those years, and I'm very impressed and continue to be impressed over the years. So is Stepstone, who's here for Stepstone?
Good morning, Mr. Santos. This is Jose and Natalie here in the office.
Good morning, Ms. Walker. Yes, as you heard, I'm very supportive of the proposal here, and heard the staff very loud and clear with regards to the strategy. But my question to you, Ms. Walker, is given the level of dry powder that we have in this strategy globally, what strategy your firm intends to recommend to both the staff on the board with regards to follow up on Mr. Jones's comment regarding the sourcing, the deal flow? It's very competitive up there. So I'm interested to see how your strategy changes, or what are you recommending to the staff in terms of deal sourcing? And of course, we need to get those great managers. The quality managers are really key.
Sure, great question. So it is a competitive environment. I think, the staff, as they mentioned, will be allocating, close to $3 billion in the near term annually. So our recommendation is to really leverage those direct relationships with general partners to access the best deal flow. And in our experience, having significant capital in each of the general partners' funds can put you in a more favored position in terms of getting allocation to the best co-investments and secondaries. So I think one, we'd recommend as a strategy really kind of leaning into your core relationships on the GP side and focusing on cultivating co-investment and secondary relationships with top picks within your portfolio. Secondly, I would say, LACERA has developed a relationship and a reputation in the market from the brokers and the secondary and co-investment community. So really leaning on those relationships as well, and making sure that the broader private equity universe knows that you're a direct investor in co-investments and secondaries is helpful to generating deal flow.
That's right, Ms. Walker. My question was not limited to co-investing. I was more interested in the underlying program, the private equity program, because I understand with regards to co-investing is that we, at least up to this point, we've been partnered with existing relationships, which is tremendous because we know how they're performing and things of that nature. But my question is more direct to the new managers, the new partnerships globally. We had experience, which your firm knows quite well, with that, I believe it was a venture fund from Latin America that everybody approved. In fact, your firm made a recommendation for us to invest in this particular fund. And at the end, we were not able to have a meeting of the minds with regards to the terms of that agreement, and as a consequence, we had to walk away. So that's my concern: is that what strategy is your firm as a consultant implementing that will allow us to deploy the large amount of money? As you know, we're going to be competing with big ones like CalPERS and CalSTRS in New York, and others who typically deploy about $500 million per deal. So I'm interested to hear what your firm, or how that firm is going to help us do this. Are we going to, is your firm active, for example, in Col Capital, which is the private equity association in Colombia, and other private equities around the world that will help us position ourselves and get LACERA's name out in the industry?
Definitely. I think LACERA continues to leverage the 19 offices that StepStone has globally. So I think from a geographic perspective, continuing to cultivate those relationships internationally is something that we would encourage. Your question around the size of capital or quantum of capital that you'll be deploying, I think it's probably a bifurcated strategy where you should be doubling down or increasing commitments to some of your large managers and global buyout funds. And then on the smaller end of the scale, selectively starting new relationships like you have through your emerging manager program that potentially graduate to core positions in the future. So having kind of that barbell approach of investing, sizable dollars, as well as, being flexible on the minimums to get in the door early, I think is a good strategy here.
And forgive me, Ms. Walker, if I may, Mr. Chair, follow up a question here, is that I'm a little skeptical with regards to investing with large firms. Usually they raise $16 billion, $20 billion, you name it. And my question over the years has been, can a fund of $20 billion be deployed adequately? I'm under the impression that more the middle managers type is where the opportunities are at. Is that true? Am I mistaken with regards to my concerns with regards to large funds versus the mid-market funds?
Yeah, Mr. Santos, this is Jose Fernandez at StepStone. Just following up on what Ms. Walker was saying, when we say larger funds, the mid-market, as you know, because the private equity market has gotten so large, the mid-market has expanded from what used to be, maybe a $3 billion fund was a mid-market fund. Today, that's an $8 to $10 billion fund. It's a mid-market fund. And that's, I think, where most of LACERA's capital has been concentrated. It's not in the very large funds, although there's some of those, but mostly in the mid-market. Although again, those $8 billion fund used to be the largest funds in private equity. Now, $20 billion funds are the largest funds in private equity. So the market has expanded in that way. I think that's why what Ms. Walker mentioned is very important, that continue to invest in those 8, 10, $12 billion funds that can accept a large commitment, but also a very important strategy for LACERA is to not abandon the smaller end of the market. So below the $8 billion funds, including emerging markets and emerging managers, and as those emerging managers grow, and you have several examples of them in your portfolio, where they may have been less than $1 billion fund when LACERA first invested, is today an $8 billion fund, and you have been able to grow your commitments as those funds grow, and those funds have continued to generate very good returns. So having exposure across the spectrum is important, because one of the things, you mentioned some other large pension plans. One of the things, so some of those other large pension plans, as they commit more dollars, they stop investing in smaller funds. The strategy we recommend is that you don't stop investing in smaller funds, even though you're going to be committing more dollars. So that's an important part of the strategy, as Ms. Walker mentioned, just continuing to invest in those smaller funds and then increasing your commitments as they grow. And then the international exposure, as you mentioned, that's where we think StepStone can be very helpful in terms of the fact that we have people in Asia, in Latin America, people specifically covering Africa, that can help source some commitments for LACERA. But of course, LACERA also is in a better position than many pension funds that we know, because you have a relatively large staff and a very good staff with their own very good and strong relationships. So that's also going to be helpful. And then becoming a limited partner of choice. These general partners can select their partners. And how does LACERA become a limited partner of choice? Actually, this co-investment program and secondary program is very helpful, because the general partners then can view LACERA as not just a primary investor in their funds, but also a potential value-added investor, as they can commit to co-investments or take a secondary position, which means that they are replacing another limited partner, and the general partner already knows LACERA, so that is helpful to them. So I think all of that helps. And then last point is, you mentioned the organizations, and we do participate in LAFCA for Latin America, the Latin America Venture Capital Association, which is improperly named because it includes venture capital and private equity. And then Cold Capital, you mentioned in Colombia. There's others in Peru, and Mexico is a MEXCAP. And there's organizations focused in Africa and generally emerging markets like MPEA, which is just all emerging markets. So we do participate in all those, and those do help source opportunities.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Mr. Fernandez, appreciate your comments. I move approval of staff recommendation.
A second. A second.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Santos made the motion, Mr. Kelly second.
Sorry,
And-
Linda, I was muted.
That's okay.
I was talking about Mr. Kehoe being in the queue, but thank you for the motion, the second. Mr. Kehoe is next, but John, did you want to touch briefly on Mr. Santos's question or points?
I could do it very quickly. Is the recommended pacing changes is not a wholesale change in terms of our internal process, in terms of the nature of the program. The PE team meets every week, and our current pipeline is many multiples of what our annual deployment pace is. And that includes both larger commitments and new potential relationships. So I don't view this as a risky change per se. Now, what happens in the market, that we never know. But in terms of our process, I think that we've got a very solid pipeline and process.
Thank you, Mr. Grable. I have Mr. Kehoe.
Thank you very much. I have just a question about, I think it's more of a process question on this. So I know we're discussing dollar amounts and we're getting very granular on these dollar amounts. Yet the asset allocation overall for private equity is set at a target of, I think, 20%. Why are we not just discussing percentages and leaving those percentages alone? So right now we're talking about raising, the limits on a variety of areas. We wouldn't necessarily have to have those discussions if we were focusing on percentages, because that would flow with the increase in size of the portfolio or increase in the investments in the asset class, depending upon how we want to frame those percentage increases. So I'm just curious from staff why we're not focusing on dialing in appropriate percentages, and then those percentages would translate to actual dollar values that you have for investing on an annual basis.
I'll give it a shot, Mr. Kehoe. We want to get to the target over time. We don't want to rush into anything. And so we've always paced ourselves. And so that's why we bring the dollar amounts and we use the pacing model at Stepstone to try to calculate how we can get there in a judicious way. So we don't want to be over-committing early, because as John just said, we can't predict what the market's going to do. And so we don't want to be way over our target allocation. And this has served us well over time. I think right now we're about at 14.5% of the NAV of the entire trust. So we find that just going there at a measured pace brings some discipline to the process. And of course, we are very cognizant of what those percentages are because we see them every quarter. But we come up with those dollar amounts and try to estimate what that percentage will be as we move forward. So it really is both dollars and percentages. But we believe that doing it at a measured pace is just more constructive to how we put the portfolio together.
So as a follow-up, I totally understand that. I agree 110%. The target might be 20%, but we've seen it slowly go up over time, which is great. It's measured. That's what we should be doing. But we still gave you a 20% target, and we stepped back as a board and said, okay, get to that as you do it. So when we get into the granular level and we're talking about, this $2 billion and slow increase on that, why are we talking dollars? Why don't we just give you a percentage? And we understand you're going to be under that percentage, but your goal is to get to that percentage, rather than coming back and saying, okay, well, we hit it, now let's ask for some more. Okay, we hit it, now we ask for some more. I don't mind doing that as a board. That's what we're here for. But I just think if we looked at appropriate percentage of assuming, okay, we were 100% funded, we had all 20% in here, what percentages do we want in each of these subcategories? And then we just give you those percentage limits. And then you try and fill into that amount. So if that makes sense. I don't mind if we're going to be approving dollar values, but we seem to be mixing asset allocation targets with, then we're getting granular on dollar values. So to me, it's just kind of backwards. I'd rather just say, here's your percentages from the very top overall portfolio all the way down to the minute levels, and now go forth and conquer. That's what I would prefer to look at doing. But
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
One thought is, or maybe the easiest answer, I thought Chris gave a good answer, is that the way that we're doing is the convention. My sense is all our peers do it like this, but to kind of pre-discuss what we're going to discuss in the offsite section about allocator to investor and exploring different models, I think that is a constructive comment that we can come back to the board in the future to not just present a dollar when you don't know what's going to happen to the denominator, which I think is your point. And we can come back with a percentage in subsequent structure reviews.
Perfect. And I'm by no means suggesting, not supporting this item. So I am in support of the item as it's presented. My suggestion is exactly that, Mr. Grable, is why don't we take that back? You look at it and say, let's go with percentages. And it's probably going to be a lot higher than these. In fact, I know it'll be significantly higher than these dollar limits, but we can live with that because now we're giving you percentages to work within, and then we don't have to sit down and discuss it, going forward. I think it puts a limit rather than gets granular at it. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. So I will go ahead and be comfortable with tabling that discussion to the offsite, and I'm in support of the motion that's presented.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. I do not see anyone else in the queue. We have a motion and a second. Any final discussion on this item? And I apologize, my video seems to have died, but I'm here. Linda, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe.
Aye.
I don't see Ms. Greenwood. Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
okay, and Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, Linda. We are on to 8B, which is a recommendation by Mr. Rice related to the Brown Act, the emergency order by the governor, and our ongoing meetings. And this going forward will be a routine item that we will consider under the consent portion of the agenda. Unless there are any questions for Mr. Rice, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move the item.
Motion or moved by Mr. Kelly.
Chair Knox, I have a question.
Can I get
I do as well.
a second before?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. So a motion by Kelly, second by Bernstein. I have Mr. Bernstein in the queue, followed by Mr. Kehoe.
My recollection is that we passed this last week at the BOR, but we amended it so that it would, going forward, go to consent rather than non-consent. I just wanted to confirm that we have the same motion here. And if not, I wanted to suggest we amend the motion so that going forward, this returns as it has to, but returns on consent.
Mr. Rice?
Yes, I took the BOR as more of a comment, which we will certainly intend to follow as opposed to part of the motion. I could be mistaken about that, but it's fine to have it as part of the motion. The important thing is that each time the board actually make an affirmative decision that the findings still can be made, but that can be done via consent.
So if the motion maker is comfortable, I would suggest we amend the motion, just that we pass the motion, but that the return be on consent next month and not on non-consent.
And I'm fine with that as an approver.
And then just as a comment, with staff coming back, this is a good time to not make things more complicated, but I want to just reiterate the concerns I mentioned last month, that we are the trustees of this organization. We are sending our employees back into the office, and we don't have really a plan to get back ourselves. I think that if our workers are being required to show up at the office, we need to be timely about getting back. I don't think this is the time this month, but I am concerned about the timeline for that.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Kehoe has withdrawn his request to address this item. Mr. Kelly, did you have a comment?
I did. Following up on Mr. Bernstein's comments, with which I agree, no one has contacted me from staff regarding my vaccination confirmation. So we've been talking about staff, but the board is if the board goes back to the boardroom, that whole process needs to needs to apply also to trustees. And so I hope that sometime in the near future, we get some communication from the CEO about that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I do not see anyone else in the queue. We have a motion and a second. Linda, please call the roll.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos, Mr. Santos. Okay. Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
okay, and Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are on to 8C, recommendation, board approve attendance of 4 trustees at the Latin America U.S. real estate meeting, November 29th and 30th.
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Bernstein,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Kelly. Any other discussion? Linda, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos. Okay, Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood, not here. Mr. Jones,
Aye.
thank you. Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
okay, and Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. 8D is similar, a request that the board approve attendance for trustees at the Oxford Impact Investing Program, January 31st through February 4th, 2022.
I'll approve the item.
Moved by Mr. Kelly. I will second. Any
Okay.
discussion? Linda, please call the roll.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Santos,
I'm sorry, I lost connection. What are we voting on?
This is the 8D travel for the Oxford Impact Investing Program in January 2022.
Thank you. Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Bernstein,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
and Chair Knox.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We are on to item 9 under reports. The first item, rotation of board officers. We have a memo from Mr. Bernstein as chair of the BOR and myself. It follows up from our discussion last month. There's no formal approval yet on this item, but staff is looking for feedback on the key terms that are at the end of that report. There's a menu of options at the end. Mr. Liu is here. He's going to give us a quick overview again. But before I turn it over to him, I did ask that he share what the board selected, our Board of Retirement selected from that menu of options, not to force us to do the same thing as the BOI, but just out of, I think, consideration. If we want to be consistent with that, that's certainly an option. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Chair Knox and trustees. Good morning, everybody. Just a short recap. Back in September, a number of options were presented to the board about alternatives to the current process of doing board elections. And so the general consensus was that the board wanted to go with a seniority-based system. So this memo basically lays out, kind of dives deeper into the terms of that process. So I'll just briefly kind of go over those. So we're going to go with a seniority list. One of the concerns was that maybe there was a lack of parity between the appointed and elected trustees. So a couple of alternatives to consider in terms of how we would compose that list. In the memo, I indicated one option would be to count the gap year for appointed trustees, or the other option would be to have a separate seniority list between elected and appointed trustees. Now, one point of clarification I would like to make is that these options will be mutually exclusive. And I'm also talking from the perspective of each board position. So you have 3 board positions, but under each position, for example, option 1 would be one list with appointed and elected trustees and counting the gap year, or option 2 would be a separate list between elected and appointed trustees, and then you sort of alternate odd or even years for that particular position. The other term here would be years of board service, how we count that. I think we would basically count all LACERA board service that a trustee has within that board. We're not commingling service from both boards. We're going to alternate board members. This board does not have alternate board members, so it's really not relevant to this board and more for the Board of Retirement. And then as far as the minimum service requirement, about whether, someone should have at least 1 or 2 years of service before being eligible to serve. I think in this particular term, it may have been more relevant in the other option that we have presented about if you were to rotate your board seat number. I think based on our prior discussions in the Board of Retirement, this may not be an issue. And then as far as term limits are concerned, I think the way we have things set up, you probably won't have people serving consecutive terms because of the fact that, you're alternating, or somebody who has served already, is going to have their years reset to 0. And so somebody else will be on the list. As far as opting out is concerned, something to consider would be whether someone can indefinitely opt out of serving in that position, or should there be a number of limits that they can opt out on. One thing last time at the Board of Retirement that I didn't discuss that I think we should deal with here as well would be vacancies. In case a trustee couldn't serve out the term, how we would want to deal with that. So with that, I basically summarized the key terms here that, for this board to consider at the end of the memo, and then keep in mind that we should also add in the topic of vacancies as well. So happy to get any feedback from everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. I appreciate your efforts on this. And just to summarize, the BOR said, yes, credit for the gap year, no to keeping separate lists of appointed and elected trustees, no minimum service before becoming an officer, and then the number of opt-outs would be indefinite. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have Mr. Kelly in the queue.
Thank you. And thank you for your work on this, Barry. I have some questions. On page 2, under background, I didn't see reference to the JOGC. And my recollection is this first also flowed through the JOGC, no?
I think I was originally assigned this task back in August, and my understanding was it was to go to each board separately. So we didn't really discuss the GOGC. And I think
I'm not saying in the future, I'm talking about the past. You talk about how the policy flowed through to where it is today. Previously, the JOGC discussed this matter first, is my recollection, several months ago.
I don't recall that.
Am I wrong, Mr. Knox?
As the chair of the JOGC, it did not go through us.
Yeah,
Did not?
no, it did not.
Okay. Under discussion, each board could adopt a policy that differs from the other board, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So it would not necessarily have to go to a joint board meeting. It could be decided individually by each board.
Correct. I think we may have been thinking out loud on that initially when we start this process.
Okay, on the bottom of page 2 under seniority list, under your comment, I thought it would be just helpful to note that the Board of Supervisors also face term limits, which restrict their ability to appoint trustees on an ongoing basis, because they can only appoint trustees during the term of their service. On page 3, on the top of page 3, gap year for appointed trustees. I think you referred to this in your comment,
Hey,
but
Lindsay,
it's still
sorry, I'm on this LACERA
Mr.
board call.
Hernandez, can you please mute your mic? Thank you.
I think you referred to this in your opening comment, but I'm still a little bit confused about the single seniority list, because earlier in the memo you said that the list is officer specific, which means that there would be 3 seniority lists, not a single seniority list.
Yeah, so that's what I want to clarify. So we have 3 board officer positions: chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I think it would be most helpful to look at this from the perspectives of each officer position. So, for example, for chair, the option would be, should we use a gap year approach or a separate seniority list approach? And that would be consistent across each board officer position. So that's why if you're going to go with the gap year approach, that's basically one list under the chair position with people commingled, or the other option would be separate the list between elected and appointed under that position.
Okay, got it. There's reference to, on the bottom of page 2, sorry, on the bottom of page 3, there's reference to alternate board members. And you speak to the current practice that alternate board members participate in the meetings. But does state law require that the alternate board members participate in the meetings? If it does not require, if state law does not require that, I would be uncomfortable considering the current practice of the elected alternates, assuming that their practice will be the practice of future elected alternates.
Yeah, so I think I clarified that this board does not have alternates, but as to your question, state law does not require that alternates or even regular trustees attend any meetings. But the practice has been that they do attend meetings along with their regular members.
Okay, and then on page 4, under term limits, you state that if a single seniority list is used under the gap year approach, it would not be possible for a trustee who served in an officer position to serve a consecutive term in that same position. And I don't know if that statement is true because some of the other trustees may be newly elected or appointed and may not be eligible to serve. They would not even have the opportunity to opt out because they're not eligible to serve. So I didn't necessarily think that was a true statement. Do you have a comment on that?
There's no minimum service required. Why in your example would they be ineligible to serve as an officer?
Because they're newly elected and they haven't served for a year.
One of the options is requiring minimum service. The BOR generally like the idea of no minimum service.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the memo here.
And Joe, can I expand on that? Because I see your point. I do not recall in the BR discussion a prohibition against back-to-back terms. Effectively, it seems unlikely on a seniority-based system, but we had a conversation about brand new people. And one of the points that was raised is that the outgoing chair, for instance, under the system would have 1 year of credit at the end of the year because you lose all of your prior time. But for the year that you're in an office, you're accruing time. That person would have more time than a brand new member of the Board of Investments. And therefore, logically, if the 7 other people declined the chairmanship, which would be required, the chair would be able to step in again ahead of the brand new elected or appointee.
Understood.
So Barry, we might want to clarify that.
Yeah, understood. And again, I'm just talking about the memo that I reviewed. I'm not privy outside of the summary of the discussions at the BOR. So my final comment was, I do think that I had a little bit of a different perspective in terms of this use of this language, offer the position, because technically how I viewed it is the senior most person has the position. There's no process by which he or she is offered the position. It accrues to the most senior person. That person then has to make a decision whether or not to accept it or decline it. And so my other comment related to the ongoing process would be, I think at some point, maybe in October, the trustees on the board, all trustees on the board should receive the seniority list so we're all aware of where we stand. I didn't necessarily see that referenced on page 5 in terms of implementation, but I think that would be a good thing. So those are my questions. Thank you very much. Also, thank you for all your work on this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I do not see anyone else in the queue. I know for myself, again, I appreciate all the hard work, Mr. Liu. I was generally supportive of what was agreed upon at the BOR. I think those options make sense to me. Okay, thank you very much. The rest of the items under reports are for information only, items B through F. I have not received any requests to hold any of those items. Any questions before we move on? Thank you. Items for staff review. Linda, do we have anything?
I don't have anything.
Perfect. We are on to good of the order. Can you please call on everybody, Linda?
Yes. I will start with Mr. Green.
Good morning. I don't have anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Santos.
Yes, thank you. I again would like to thank the staff for the tremendous work that they have done in the private equity strategy. Keep up the good work. And I love the numbers. 60% on the co-investing program is outstanding. Make sure you have the same numbers next year and then after. Only kidding. Only kidding. Great job. Thank you. And have a beautiful day.
Mr. Kehoe?
Nothing, just I reiterate, thank you to staff on all this hard work, and I'm looking forward to our offsite that's about to begin.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
No comment, nothing.
Mr. Bernstein?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. Thank you to staff. I also want to note I participated in the anniversary celebration for Pew Capital. I listened in on that, which was a tremendous event. And then I also listened in on Makita's Women in Investments webinar, which was equally as impressive. I asked Makita what percentage of the audience was male. Unfortunately, it was, I think, under 15%, because I think more men could have benefited from it. But both of those were really, really informative and really, really wonderful events. So I wanted to thank folks for putting those on. Thank you.
Chair Knox? I'm sorry, no, I'm saving you for that, sorry. John Grable.
I would like to introduce two people to the board. We have two interns right now in the investment division. The first, I don't know if they have access to cameras, is Martin Wolf. Martin is an MBA candidate at USC. Welcome aboard, Martin. We're looking forward to working with you. The intern started a couple of weeks ago. And the second is Bruno Pisenane. Bruno is an MBA candidate at UCLA, and both Martin and Bruno are working with our portfolio analytics team on two projects. The first is risk budgeting, and the second is coming up with kind of a new fee analytic that we could potentially have a nice simple measure to discuss the fee efficacy associated with our portfolio and investment. And we hope to have a presentation from both Martin and Bruno at the January BOI. So welcome, Bruno and Martin.
Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Craven?
Yes, I just wanted to also introduce Laura Guglielmo, who joined our team about 2-3 weeks ago, I believe now. So she's our new executive officer over the administration side. And so I just wanted to make sure I pointed her out. And if you wanted to just say hello to everyone, that would be fantastic.
Good morning, everyone. Trustees, I've met several of you so far, which I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat with you. I'm really excited to join the LACERA team. I come with about 25 years of experience with the city of LA, including several years as assistant general manager of the fire and police pension system over administration, so a very similar role, and also other experience in management levels at the city of LA, and also as a city manager with the city of Palos Verdes Estates, home to Trustee Jones. So I appreciate the opportunity to join the LACERA team. I think it's a terrific opportunity and a terrific organization, and look forward to working with all of you.
Welcome again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Rice?
Good morning, nothing to add.
Okay. JJ Popovich?
Nothing to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Chair Knox?
Thank you, Linda. I just wanted to note that John and his team are working on the solicitation for general consultant, and there's an opportunity for 3 or 4 of the trustees to serve on the interview panel to meet with the proposers. If you were interested, please let me know by the end of the week, and I'll make a selection from those that are interested. And certainly rooting for the Dodgers tomorrow night. And with that, we are going to go into executive session. Linda, I'm going to leave and come back to try and reset my video.
Okay.
Maybe we'll just take a quick 2-minute break. We'll probably take a little bit long.
Yeah,
longer
we're going to
break
have to take a longer break because we have to move all of the investment
Okay.
team into the waiting room. So it's going to take a couple of minutes. So
Okay, well, let's take 5 minutes now and then we'll
Perfect.
take like 10 minutes after the executive session just to set up for the offsite.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You're on mute, John.